Hello, everyone. Thanks to all of you who have registered and are now viewing our webinar, brought to you today by Rotor and Wing International and Avionics magazine. My name is Woodrow Bellamy. I am the editor of Avionics magazine, and this webinar is ADSB, the latest on compliance, installation, and operation. And we know there's a lot of questions out there about the ADSB 2020 mandate, and we'll definitely try to get all of those answered for you all today. So before we begin, I want to go ahead and introduce our speakers and the format of the webinar. So today we have from the FAA, James Marks, who is the ADSB Focus Team Lead for the FAA. We also have Gary Harvester, who is an Avionics Modification Specialist for Duncan Aviation. We also have Craig Morgan, who is the Senior Vice President of Sales for Applied Avionics, and Hal Adams, Group Business Development Leader for Becker Avionics, and Daniel Buzz, who is President of CMD Flight Solutions. So while viewing this webinar, you should see an option within your presentation that allows you to submit questions. And you can go ahead and do that throughout the webinar, and we will look to get those answered by the presenters towards the end of the webinar after all of the presentations are done. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first presenter. His name is James Marks. He is the ADSB Focus Team Lead for the FAA. James.
James, are you on mute?
I am so sorry. I am on mute. So I'm going to repeat all that. First, I just want to thank Avionics Magazine and the sponsors for hosting this event. It's a great opportunity for all the presenters here to provide information on ADSB mandate equipage, and the FAA truly appreciates that opportunity to participate in the event. I just want to make sure that folks can see what's on the screen, because this is my first webinar, so I just want to make sure that we are presenting the material. And hearing nothing, I'll go on in. So I'm James Marks. I'm the ADSB Focus Team Lead for Flight Standards. My team is essentially responsible for mitigating any equipage barriers associated with the mandate, but we are in the Flight Standards Service also responsible for ensuring compliance of the rule. So with that brief introduction, we'll go into it. So I kind of wanted to share with you what we've done over the past few years to ensure that mandate equipage was enabled by policy and guidance to occur in the time that we have remaining before the mandate on January 1st, 2020. So we identified some equipage barriers through Equip 2020, and I'll share those, and then I'll go over some installation challenges that we've seen. And we identified those challenges through various means, through feedback from the field, but also with our rule performance monitoring that we do. So we capture all the data from ADSB operations within the U.S., and we analyze that to see where performance issues might be. And then I'll cover some common installation and performance issues that we've identified through that monitoring. And then I've got some backup slides that I won't have time to address today, but I wanted to include those in the presentation so the folks participating would have access to some additional information that should help you in addition to what I provided in the slide deck. So with that, we'll go into the enablers that I talked about. So over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, I think, 2010 was the first policy memo that we issued for ADSB out installations. We revised that policy last year to enable broader use of the ADSB out transmitter and GPS pairing data on non-AML aircraft. So what that allows you to do, and what the FAA is most interested in, is to make sure that transmitter and GPS pairing function properly to meet the performance requirements of 91227. So what that allows you to do is take approved data from 172, and you can use that data to install the equipment on the aircraft that might not have been covered by that original STC AML. So that's been very effective, and really with the issuance of that policy memo, we're just sort of chasing the outlier aircraft that might remain. We also revised the process for certification projects and what we call a no P&L, and what that is a project notification letter that initiates a certification project. So if we have an ODA that's authorized to do so, that cuts about 30 days off the typical certification project timeline. And then we ran into issues with installing ADSB out equipment on RVSM and TCAS approved aircraft. And most of those issues were that the original STC identified a specific transponder within the STC documentation. So when you updated the ADSB equipment, whether it was through software or whatever, if the part number changed, then that had to be addressed in the original STC. So we've issued a policy memo that covers installations on both RVSM and TCAS. We are in the process of developing a technical paper that supports the policy memo that was published last March. And really that has the meat of the guidance associated with the policy memo. The policy memo was overarching sort of guidance and policy, but the tech paper will have the meat and the details behind that policy. We are hoping to have that document published within the next couple of months. We had hoped to have it out by October of last year, but as we developed that document with industry, we ran into different scenarios that we thought needed to be addressed. So it's kind of had an evolutionary process, but we're hoping to get that published within the next couple of months. And once it is, it'll be published to the AFS 300 Major Alteration Repair Job Aid. Some installation challenges. Last year, I think around AirVenture time, so about this time last year, we participated in some discussions with the aerobatics community, and they were discouraging their members from equipping, and that was mainly due to the reduced performance. And when I say that, below what 91227 requires, which is expected of an aircraft that's out doing aerobatic maneuvering. The system just can't keep up with those changes in flight. So we're collaborating both internally with industry to address that. We're going to update some orders, FAA orders and policy documents that will address their concerns. And basically what that will do is when they're participating in an air show or doing aerobatics, they will basically be have waiver authority from the FAA to not meet the performance requirements of the rule. And then recently we've, as the mandate gets closer, I think we're 29 months away from the mandate, we're starting to hear that some special light sport aircraft owners are having problems getting LOAs, letters of authorization from the manufacturers to cover installation of equipment on those aircraft. So that discussion is really just starting to heat up, so to speak. So we're going to try to take care of that in some way to allow those folks to equip in time for the mandate. And then there are also issues with installing an ADS-B out system on an aircraft that also has ADS-B in functionality, and we're going to address those issues in the tech paper that we hope to publish in the next few months. And then related to the policy memo that was published last year, a couple of months after that, we released an FAA notice concerning that national policy. Those notices have a 1-year shelf life. Once it reached its 12 months, it was canceled, and a lot of people thought, well, that cancels the policy. But what it did was it just canceled the notice. The policy is still in effect via the AVS policy memo that's available on the regulatory guidance library. And there are links embedded within the presentation that you'll have available afterwards that you can click on. It'll take you directly to the document so you can review those. ADS-B out rule performance monitoring. So this is how we identify a lot of the issues, post-installation issues. All of that monitoring is done through the FAA's ADS-B performance monitor by my team. It also supports compliance of the rule for all ADS-B equipped aircraft operating in the U.S. And when we identify a specific issue, performance issue with an aircraft that's of what we classify as high priority or hazardous behavior, then my team contacts those owners, operators, or repair stations, whichever may be appropriate, to have those systems corrected. And we refer to those aircraft as non-performing equipment. So the term NPE you'll see later in the slide deck, but that's what it means. It's basically an aircraft that doesn't comply in some way with 91227. We've also established an FAA email account and a web-based public ADS-B performance report service. And what that enables is aircraft owners and repair stations to verify that their avionics system complies with the ADS-B rules. And I believe in the backup slide I have information to get to both of those should you need to use them. And now we'll go over some common installation issues, and this is what my team spends most of their time doing, is identifying and contacting owners that have these problems. One of the biggest problems is the incorrect or invalid 24-bit ICAO addresses, and that's the Mode S address that's assigned by the FAA during registration. So what we see a lot of times is that aircraft have systems installed and then they begin operating with what are typically factory default codes. So you can see the list of 5 invalid ICAOs that we see most often. And there's numerous aircraft flying around. There may be 10 or 12 aircraft flying around with all 0 hex codes or any one of the other. So we try as best we can to identify the real aircraft and contact the applicable owner. But what we also see is just simple fat fingering while the repair shop is configuring the ICAO code into the system after installation. And then we've also had reports of the avionics not retaining the configuration settings once the system is powered down and then powered back on. It'll revert back to, in some cases, reported as a factory default. And that becomes a concern when you've got two aircraft transmitting the same data flying near one another or within the same ATC. The ground automation system can't distinguish between those two aircraft, so which presents a problem to the controllers. Another issue I know has affected folks trying to participate in the FAA's ADS-B rebate program is air ground determination. You can see in the graphic there on the slide, the red plots are where the aircraft was on the surface of the airport but was transmitting airborne data. And we should never see that in an en route service volume because we don't process surface data in those environments through the automation system. So what we see is aircraft taxiing around on the ground transmitting airborne data. And that happens for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's some avionics systems are configurable via the ground speed to determine whether it's on the ground or in the air. Sometimes that can be adjusted, sometimes not. And then we've also seen avionics where they initialize in the air at startup and remain that way for the entire flight. We've seen a few instances where there were squat switch rigging issues or inoperative squat switches, but typically the issues reside within aircraft that use some automated means to determine whether or not they are on the ground or in the air, and that's typically done through GPS speed. We know there are some design issues with the various manufacturers that need to be addressed. Some manufacturers have already updated software to kind of alleviate this problem, but we want to address it in a broader sense, so we established a special committee earlier this year to look at different ways to improve the air-ground performance of those aircraft that aren't using a squat switch. Other installation issues are flight identification code. So, and I apologize for the graphic here. I was trying to cover up the real tail number, so I apologize to that person should this information get to them. But basically, what you can't see is in the block, the aircraft data block at the bottom of the slide, you can see where the tail number is yellowed out. But basically, what's happening in this instance is the aircraft is transmitting a flight ID that differs from their tail number. So we call that a flight ID mismatch with the ICAO code. So those we want to clean up. ATC typically uses the flight ID to establish a track on an aircraft and to communicate with it. So there's mismatch issues there. There are other issues where the flight ID was entered incorrectly and maybe a space was induced in the tail number when it was entered in, or we see blank flight IDs, we're not transmitting anything. We see the N left off of the tail number and the flight ID, or we see N only, illegal characters, all sorts of different issues. So care should be taken to make sure that on GA aircraft, typically, that don't change their flight ID, it should match their tail number after installation. We do see some Mode 3A code errors on UATs, and these are usually systems that employ a sniffer to pick up the Mode 3A code from the transponder at the antenna. So we see Mode 3A missing, or it's unstable, sometimes it's intermittent. Or In some cases, we've actually seen the Mode 3A co-transmit function disabled at installation. So you have to be careful to make sure that is enabled after installation. We see positioning errors. These are very small numbers for these. Initially, we had some installations where the software levels for the various components of the ADS-B system weren't compatible, so it would create not only this problem, but several other problems. But you can see that some of these position jumps are, 2,300 feet, which is not desirable. Emitter category, which is a code that's transmitted to characterize the aircraft size, shape, speed, those types of things. And what you can't see on this slide is where I was trying to highlight a couple of specific items on this aircraft is that this is a flight design aircraft that's transmitting an emitter category of 15, which is a space vehicle essentially. So a lot of these, we have a lot of rotorcraft that are transmitting emitter categories for a fixed wing aircraft, light or small aircraft, when they should be transmitting an emitter category of 7. So another item that needs to be checked after installation. And I believe with that, we're at the backup slides. So I will pass this on to the next presenter.
Thanks, James. So let's bring up our next presenter is Gary Harpster of Duncan Aviation. Gary.
All right. Greetings. Looks like a lot of people from different time zones in the country. Appreciate the audience. Appreciate Avionics Magazine taking the time to put this together. A lot of good information. And you just heard James talk about some of the challenges of ADS-B, and without a doubt, there are a few. But probably from our perspective, one of the biggest challenges that we encounter are the DOMs, the directors of maintenance, and the pilots trying to get their owners and operators to go ahead and incorporate ADS-B. So with that being said, we put together a little video. Apology for the advertising portion of it, but it's something that we present to various companies. But I think the message is clear, and I'm going to go ahead and kick that off and let you watch that. It's only a 3-minute video. Here we go.
The ADS-B mandate was issued by the FAA in 2010, and your aircraft must be in compliance by the January 1st, 2020 deadline. It's important that pilots and owners have accurate information and are aware of common myths regarding the ADS-B mandate. Myth number 1. There's plenty of time. January 1st, 2020 sounds like a long time away, but here's the reality. 167 business jets need to be updated every month from now until the deadline. Only about 70 are being upgraded each month. Over time, the demand for ADS-B will only increase. Your best bet is to schedule your installation now. Myth number 2. The deadline will be extended. The FAA has given the industry 10 years to comply with the mandate and has specifically stated that there will not be an extension. FAA Administrator Michael Huerta has said the deadline isn't moving, while acknowledging that there will be capacity issues at repair stations around the country as we get closer to the deadline. Avoid market uncertainty by making the investment in ADS-B now. Myth number 3. If I wait, the price will drop. Since the ADS-B upgrade will be a requirement for aircraft on January 1st, 2020, the equipment and installation services will remain in high demand as there is not enough industry capacity to upgrade all aircraft on time. With increasing demand as the deadline approaches, the upgrade costs are more likely to increase rather than decrease. Myth number 4. We're going to sell our aircraft. All aircraft will require ADS-B equipment. Aircraft brokers frequently comment on how the aircraft outfitted with the latest technology always sell faster and at a higher sales point. With plenty of competition in the resale market, ADS-B is a sound investment. Myth number 5. I don't need ADS-B. If you intend to fly above 10,000 feet and in Class A, B, or C airspace, the ADS-B mandate requires your aircraft to be equipped with ADS-B. Aircraft without ADS-B will essentially be grounded. To ensure your aircraft is there to serve your business and your boss, make sure you schedule an ADS-B upgrade. Give us a call. We'll talk you through the process and go over the potential solutions available for your aircraft. We'll schedule you in for 2017 or let you reserve an ADS-B slot at one of our satellite locations for 2018 or 2019. The ADS-B mandate will help move our ATC system forward and is ultimately in your best interest. Give us a call to learn more or to schedule your installation. Our advice? Get ADS-B now.
Okay, the video is trying to dispel the common myths that we hear as to why they pulled off on doing ADS-B. We have done a tremendous amount of ADS-B installs. I know that Dan Buzz with CMD is online. Dan has a tremendous amount of STCs available. There's a lot of solutions out there. The one thing that I would advocate for everybody that's listening is how sincere it is that you need to get, so need to make sure that everybody schedules their aircraft as soon as possible. It's going to be a very difficult situation to go back to the owner and tell them why you're not going to be able to fly that airplane January 1, 2020. I would strongly advocate that if you have an opportunity to get the equipment that's in your aircraft, get it to a respective dealer that you're comfortable with and get a quote as to what it's going to cost to do. It is getting to be more and more challenging for customers to get a time slot that they would like because the shops are already hitting capacity. I know our shop is very, very full with ADS-B installations. We have 27 satellite shop facilities. They're also echoing the same thing. There's a lot of shops. We're only able to handle 2 installations per month. We looked at various shops that we have around the country, and we took the populace that they have, the number of customers that they normally have, and we called them to find out how many already had ADS-B, how many anticipated doing ADS-B, and we look at the remaining aircraft, and there's a good third of those aircraft that they're not going to be able to get into the shop. They'll definitely have to go someplace else because there's no way we'll be able to handle that load. You do want to take it to a place that's comfortable with your aircraft, that has knowledge on it, so you don't run into some of the challenges that James Marks just talked about. So that's very, very important. My information is on the web, so if you have any questions, feel free to email me with any specifics. I'll be glad to go over anything I can with you. But other than that, I just would not wait. I'd get something rolling right now so that at least you have that in your back pocket, all the information you need to present to the owner and try to get it scheduled just as soon as possible. And with that, I'll let the next presenter go.
Thanks, Gary. And I just want to remind the viewers we are going to make the presentations available after the webinar is done. And now I want to bring up our next presenter is Hal Adams from Becker Avionics. Hal.
Thank you, Woodrow, and thanks to Avionics Magazine and Rotor Wing International for sponsoring this. Basically, just a real quick review of some of the problems, because we kind of take a rotorcraft view on this one. And there are some special things going on in that area, and a lot of this is well known, but I just thought I'd pass anyway. But ADS-B worldwide, it's another issue, is there's mixed requirements, emerging requirements, and even none. Interoperability with the helicopter, rotorcraft, and fixed wing UASs, small UASs, that's a standard problem. Of course, special rotorcraft operations, EMS, special mission military, and cloaking for special mission and military. We see that happening more and more now. And of course, the initial and continuing focus has been on fixed wing. I think we see a little bit of that here today, but and the progress has been pretty advanced. Hopefully, rotorcraft is keeping pace, but it doesn't look like it. And of course, with the public being hauled around in air transport and regional aircraft, they get a lot more focus, a lot more publicity, and a lot more push, as we've seen. And the outreach to helicopter or rotorcraft people seems somewhat mixed. But anyway, some transponder challenges, because we are a transponder company. Kind of look at that as that in a rotorcraft, there is a large proliferation of design installation approvals. Helicopters have been around a long time, so you have a large mix. And they're fitted with it can be 3 or 4 year generation old avionics, which is a challenge. And of course, there's the Mode S operations, limited question mark. A lot of diverse installations, standalone transponder solutions are a bit limited. People want to put the stack in. And there's a mixture of ancillary equipment required: GPS, air data, navigators, radouts, weight on wheels, as we heard. And of course, the compatibility issues that go with those ancillary equipments, such as GPS integrity performance. And of course, really sensitive to that, in helicopters is the size, weight, power, and of course, everybody's concerned about affordability. Just to give you an example of some of the challenges that are being faced here, just to give you an example, some of the transponder sizes and weights we'll get to in a second. And so you can see there's the space issues, at least with the more top-line, larger equipment. Not to mention the interface, is it 429, 232, 422, Ethernet, CAN, it kind of goes on and on. So what we've done is we just certified this and as a line fit of Pilatus. We have a family of transponder, which we specifically address that because Becker's been in the rotorcraft avionics for over 30 years with mission and CNS equipment as well. And the first one out of the chute is a non-TCAS 2, but we'll be doing a TCAS 2 compatible version later. Trying to address all the stuff we're talking about that I just mentioned. And we always certify all of our equipment to helicopter vibration, for example, but environmentals in general. And we added a lot of interface capability and ability to work with multiple GNSS, GPS, control panels, etc. And what we've done is basically cut the size significantly, so it's smaller, lighter, cooler, and cheaper. Weight is down quite a bit, and power dissipation. We do not require any cooling air or holes or anything like that, so it's environmentally pretty solid. And affordable. We're targeting basically half the current offering prices. Simplify the installation, working with our team to do that, and configuration on wing updating, of course. And as a result of the reliability and the extended warranty we're offering with this, you get a lower cost of ownership overall. So we have addressed what we think in our area about the transponders is required. And there's one special area we do, which is we call it cloaking, and we're actually operating with that right now. And with we actually disable the ADSB enhanced message out of Mode S, and we also have the ability, and are working getting that completed, of actually disabling Mode S at the request of some of the governmental type operations and first responders, etc., to disable the Mode S and operate with AC only, so that nobody can tell who that is operating, but you can still see them in ATC. And that's probably something not heard much about. It's kind of low key. You also have to have a ATC approval to do that, but it is available, and this is for rotorcraft operations. And that's basically it. So Woodrow, back to you.
Thanks, Hal. So I want to bring up our next presenter is Daniel Buzz of CMD Solutions. Daniel.
Hello there. Thank you for joining us today. A few years ago, CMD Flight Solutions got together. We're an engineering and certification house, and we saw the need to help different shops and fleet operators get through the installation of ADS-B solutions on their aircraft. And so we took it upon ourselves and went out and developed some approved model list supplemental type certificates, which the approved model list, if you're not familiar, is a single STC that lists the applicability of multiple models aircraft on that as far as availability to be applicable to your aircraft. So, and we concentrated primarily on the Rockwell Collins TDR 94 and 94D transponders because that's a large majority of the fleet in the business jet world and general aviation and the regional airlines also. So that's the first one we went after. Then we decided to do the same thing in the Part 23 world to address the King Air market, which there's hundreds of them flying, and the Phenoms and so forth. So we went after that. And then finally, we went and obtained another AML STC for the Honeywell Primus 2 radio suites that you'll find in a lot of your OEM-delivered business jets. Right now, we have probably 160 different models of aircraft covered under our AML STCs, and we've got over 330 aircraft flying today that have been modified with one of our solutions. We offer tremendous support to the shops. We do sell to FAA 145 repair stations and or other repair stations with foreign CAA approvals, as we do have EASA, Brazil ANAC, and Mexico DJAC approval on our STCs. So we do provide support to those 145 or equivalent repair stations to do the modifications. We also provide DER services if you find your company needs that to, say, get a GPS upgrade installed in your aircraft, or possibly if you have a existing transponder system that's not capable of an ADS-B upgrade and you can remove it, we can support getting the Collins TDR 94 transponders into your aircraft. I invite you to go to our website, cmdflightsolutions.com, and that lists all the aircraft that are approved under our STCs and for what systems and what GPS pairings are available. I'll just go basic over on the TDR 94 basic requirements. I apologize for the font in the header up there. Basically, Collins TDR 94, 94D transponders get updated by Rockwell Collins service centers or Duncan Aviation in Lincoln, Nebraska to the -501 status that makes them DO-260B compatible. We have test flown and have approvals for the GPS pairings of the Rockwell Collins GPS 4000S, the Universal UNS-1W family, the Honeywell GNSSU, and the Free Flight 1203 GPSs. So any one of these GPSs paired with the Rockwell Collins TDRs with the -501 are approved under our STC. Now, part of the deal, what we're finding a lot of the legacy aircraft, especially domestic U.S., is that the aircraft currently don't have flight ID. So there's two ways to get there. You can update the existing controllers, and in the more integrated system that can prove a little costly by doing IOCs and CDU updates and so. Or we have recently developed a new ADS-B flight ID adapter, which I'll go into a little bit more here later in the slide, that can provide flight ID into your transponders to take care of that. While enhanced surveillance is not required for ADS-B, our STC does approve if the aircraft is capable of the flight or the enhanced surveillance capability as an option. And really the basic installation is upgrade of the transponders, interface to the GPS, install our little digital discrete adapter, and a customer-supplied ADS-B fail enunciator in the cockpit. Then on the Primus aircraft, the Honeywell Primus 2 aircraft, there addresses the RCZ-8XX ComNam transponders that are upgraded per Honeywell service bulletins. It does require upgrades to the radio management units by Honeywell service bulletins. And then again, the approved pairings that are done are the Honeywell GNSSUs or CMC equivalent, the Bendix King KGS 200, Universal UNS-1Ws, and so forth. And you do need to change the strapping modules to get the additional strapping capability. There's no remote enunciator required with the Honeywell ones, as all the ADS-B mode and failure modes are displayed on the radio management units. Then I will say, I'll talk a little bit to our STCs, that they do come fully with full instructions for continuing airworthiness, installation instructions, strapping instructions. We have a lot of tools that go along with our STC that allow you to enter the aircraft information and provides the strapping on how to strap the transponders for your particular aircraft. Our new product was developed by Shade and Avionics in conjunction with them, is exclusive to us. It is our ADS-B Flight ID adapter, and basically it's a set and forget system that you program in the aircraft N number into the aircraft, or in the case of foreign aircraft, their registration number. It takes all the different codes for foreign countries, and then once you set it, it then transmits the flight ID right into the transponders with no need to change your controllers or IOCs and so forth. It does then also provide the ADS-B fail enunciation out for monitoring the transponders. We have available harnesses, wiring harnesses, and mounting brackets that are PMA'd and available to ship right now for all of our solutions. So I would again invite you to visit our website at cmdflightsolutions.com and either call myself, Dan Buzz, or Barb, my sales VP, and we'll be glad to answer all your questions. I appreciate the time here, and thank you very much.
Right. Thanks, Dan. And we're going to go ahead and move on to our next presenter, and final presenter is Craig Morgan of Applied Avionics. Craig.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Woodrow. We've heard several different perspectives today on the mandate, and we are, of course, looking at it from the perspective of a component supplier, primarily as it concerns our Vivasun enunciators. So first off, I'd like to provide a couple of data points unique to our perspective. Our records confirm we delivered our very first Vivasun ADS-B fail enunciator sometime mid-year in 2012. That was just as the initial elements of NextGen were being put into place. So here we are, 6 years later, and our records also confirm that in the past 12 months alone, we have delivered over 1,000 ADS-B Vivasun enunciators. So from our perspective, it seems things are definitely starting to move. Now, one of the contributions Applied Avionics has made in trying to move things forward is the introduction of our Vivasun enunciator with an internal AirRink signal converter. And included in the 1,000 units we've delivered in the past 12 months is a mixture of our standard Vivasun enunciators and our enunciator with the internal signal converter, which confirms, again, as we've heard today, we're working with many different types of transponders and position hardware. So now our records also indicate that these 1,000 annunciators we have delivered are for many different aircraft types, and Becker confirmed, as have we, we're working with fixed wing, rotor, both domestic and international, and these are all signs, though the momentum is building. So based on our past ADS-B activity, and in an effort to maybe simplify the compliance process, or assist, as James indicated, in eliminating some of the equipage barriers, we have identified 3 different standard ADS-B Vivison annunciator part numbers that we feel will accommodate the design requirements for the majority of the pending ADS-B upgrades. Now, additionally, as we've heard today from Duncan, one fact is evident. Timing and upgrade scheduling are going to become a significant challenge as the mandate approaches. As a result, the 3 standard ADS-B annunciators we have identified will be available immediately for delivery from stock. Now, if you have a custom ADS-B annunciator requirement not covered by one of our 3 standard part numbers, custom ADS-B configurations will also be available for shipment in 5 days or less. So let's take a look now at the standard part numbers. These first 2 pre-configured annunciators include a dedicated illumination test pin, but do not include our internal AirRink 429 signal converter. Now, this first part number is the most basic generic annunciator and has applications with many different transponders and position devices. In fact, this is one of the parts Dan Buzz lists on his website is, again, a standard annunciator. The second part number, now the second one also includes a dedicated illumination test pin, but additionally it contains an internal, normally closed, dropout relay designed to detect loss of power or ground from the transponder or the position device and illuminate the ADS-B fail legend with a direct discrete, no signal conversion required. Now, as you see in this cutaway image, our third pre-configured part number includes our internal AirRink 429 signal converter, and the converter is already configured to the AirRink label and data bit that is compatible with the Rockwell Collins TDR94 or the 94D transponder. So you can review additional details on each of these 3 standard Vivison part numbers on our website, and of course we're standing by to assist with quotations or to answer any questions. So thank you once again for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. So I want to, once again, thanks to all of our sponsors for helping us put on this webinar. We wouldn't be able to do that without you. So now we're going to move into the question and answer portion. And we do have quite a few questions, some very specific and technical questions. We're going to try to answer all of them. So we're going to take an extra 15 minutes for the webinar here to get some of your questions answered. So if you'd like to stay on during that portion, you're certainly welcome to. So with the first question, this is addressed to James Marks of the FAA. The question says, why is it still necessary to do ADS-B flight testing for AC-2165B for STC approvals when all of the parameters can be properly tested during ground tests?
Yeah, thanks, Woodrow. So I can't speak for my colleagues in aircraft certification, but I can't say that the FAA is interested in determining what the performance of the avionics is dynamically in flight. So a system can be designed to meet the performance standards required for the rule, but we really don't know what the performance is until we actually take a system up and test fly it and then analyze the data afterward to verify that it does meet the applicable standards. So that's one reason that I'm aware of.
This is Gary Harpster. I will say that in all the installations that we've done, there has been times when that aircraft will completely test good on the ground and act differently when it's in the air. And for that reason, just so that we all have a feel good about the installation, we are asking customers to do a test flight on the aircraft after the installation is completed, just so that we know that we've got everything addressed. Some aircraft just have that peculiarity.
And this is Dan Buzz, and I'll just say one of the primary reasons from the certification office is to see how GPS dropout affects ADS-B performance. So with no control under the GPS installation and where the antenna is mounted, the FAA wants to assure that in basic maneuvers and so forth that there is no GPS dropout, which would lead to ADS-B dropout.
Okay, thanks. And the next question, I think this will be more for Duncan and possibly CMD. The question says, please address configuring or strapping a ADS-B out installation to send the ADS-B in information so that an aircraft can receive own-ship traffic information service broadcast formatted or centered on the individual aircraft via a four-flight Stratus or similar unit.
Yeah, I can address that. There are, in the case of, say, the TDR-94, there are straps on the transponder that if you tell it that even if you don't have ADS-B installed on the aircraft and you carry a iPad or so forth, you still tell it that you are 1090 ES ADS-B incapable or UAT incapable or both. You can tell it that you are even though you're not, and that will allow your own ship position to be shown on your iPad through the ForeFlight app or so forth.
Dan, this is Gary from Duncan. Does your certification allow for that strapping to take place? I was just wondering from a sign-off standpoint. It does. Yep. Okay, good enough. All right, thank you.
We talked to DC, Washington DC, on this, and they said it's perfectly fine to strap that for use of ADS-B in systems that are carry-on.
Got it.
Great. So the next question is a helicopter question, and I think this might be for the installation shops again, but it says, is a helicopter ADS-B out message required to have length and width code configured?
So this is Jim Marks. I'll go ahead and try to answer that. So I don't know of any language in AC 2165B that waives the requirement for any aircraft to not transmit the length width code when it's on the surface. Of course, that's a challenge for a helicopter because they hover taxi often, so they're airborne while they're taxiing around the airport, and when they're in that configuration, you're not required to transmit the length width code, but I don't know of any requirement in FAA policy or guidance that permits helicopters to not transmit a length width code when it's appropriate.
Thanks, James. We're getting quite a few questions about whether the presentations will be available. I do want to remind the viewers we are going to make those available to you all after this is complete. So the next question is another pretty technical question. This issue of ADS-B transmitting airborne status while on the ground should be investigated via the ASRS. James, do you have any thoughts on that about the issue of ADS-B transmitting airborne status while on the ground? I think you addressed that during your presentation.
Yeah, I did cover it. I'm not exactly sure what's being asked here as far as an investigation, but I will share this: is that when I had the slide up and I showed the graphic of an aircraft taxiing around on the airport surface, and and it shows the red plots associated with the messages transmitted from the aircraft. We know those are airborne messages because our en route service volumes don't process surface data. The only locations where we process surface messages are typically at the top 40 congested airports in the country that actually have surface surveillance available. So if we see an aircraft on the ground at any of the smaller airports around the country that don't have surface surveillance, we know they're transmitting airborne messages because that's the only messages we process in those environments. So I'm not sure if that answers the mail on a particular question, but that's what I know.
Okay, thanks, James. And this next question says, is there any restriction about broadcasting ADS-B out on both 1090ES and 978 UAT simultaneously?
I don't know of any restriction to do that. We kind of discourage it for obvious reasons. So what we do see a lot in what we refer to as dual out installations, where they've got a 1090 UAT system installed on the same aircraft and both are transmitting, is that they pick a link. Most of the 1090 units now will receive on both links, so you can get the traffic and the weather information from a single unit. But there is no restriction to limit broadcasts on both links. One particular item to remember in that case is that you need to make sure that your flight ID and your ICAO code are entered correctly on both units. Otherwise, ATC sees an ADS-B equipped aircraft will see that as two aircraft flying very close to one another.
Okay, and the next question looks like it might be a good question for Hal Adams. It's a helicopter ADS-B question, and it says, do VFR helicopters need ADS-B while flying in controlled airspace in Europe?
Hal, can you click your mute button?
Oh, sorry, was that for Hal Adams?
Yes, this was a question for you, Hal.
Sorry. VFR, ADS-B rules in Europe are for IFR aircraft.
Okay,
unless somebody wants to correct me if I'm wrong there, but that's my understanding. And yeah, let's leave it at that.
Okay, so the answer to that question is yes. VFR or IFR helicopters are required to have ADS-B in European airspace. So the next question is a military question, and it looks like this is addressed to the FAA as well. Are military aircraft exempted from ADS-B compliance?
Yeah, the answer is no. The FAA hasn't granted exemption to anyone from the ADS-B rule. We have issued exemptions for GPS equipage, but or allowed the airlines an additional 5 years to upgrade their GPS position. They'll still be required to equip in time for the mandate with a compliant transmitter, and that allowance is so they can equip with a GPS or a position source is capable of meeting the availability requirements associated with the rule. So it's not an exemption that relieves them of the requirement to equip for the mandate. It's just to give them additional time to upgrade with a SBAS WAS GPS source.
Okay, great. And the next question looks like it's addressed to Duncan Aviation. And Gary, you can take this. It says, is it possible to get equipment/installation costs for business jets by type and also estimated downtimes?
It is. The biggest thing that we need so that we can be more specific, if you just go with general guessing as to what's in the aircraft, you can be $60,000 off. So we really need to know a few things. We need to know what kind of transponders are in the aircraft, full part numbers. We need to know what kind of FMSs are in the aircraft. Are they already WAS receivers? If not, do you have WAS GPS receivers in the aircraft? And if it's a Honeywell package, we need to know the RMUs. Are they RMU 850s or the RMU 855s? And then the RCZs, radios, we need to know the dash number of the RCZ radios. With that baseline information, we can generate a proposal as to what it's going to take to get your aircraft compliant. If it's a Collins configured aircraft, we primarily need to know the existing transponder part number, and then we know whether it's a ProLine 4 or ProLine 21 or what type of a system is most generally in the aircraft. But a few of those specific questions will help us put a proposal together, and once we know that, we can estimate the downtime as well. So yes, we can certainly do that. And we're seeing a lot of corporate operators send in their Part 23 or Part 34 camps runs, both of those, and they're saying, hey, here's my existing equipment list. Now we know that sometimes the camps information can be off, but if you don't have time and you have a copy of your 23 and 34 camps runs, you can send that to us via email. We can look through that, figure out the information that we need to know, and generate a proposal based on that.
Okay, thanks. And the next question is specifically addressed to Dan, and it says, do you think you will get Canadian approval for your AML STC?
Okay, well, here's the status of that ongoing for 2 years. We are, Transport Canada is coming down with me to Bombardier in Tucson to evaluate our TDR-94 STC on the Lear 60 next week. We are hoping, and I am assured that they will be, and I believe Mr. Germain is on the seminar with us from Transport Canada. I believe he will be totally satisfied once he sees this aircraft, and that will ease us into more approvals of our STCs within Canada.
Great. And this next question looks like it's a good one for Craig Morgan of Applied Avionics. It's about the fail annunciator. And it says, is ADS-B fail annunciation mandatory for compliance with the ADS-B mandate?
Yes, this is Craig. I'm not familiar with some of the ancillary considerations on that. My understanding is there must be some visual cue for the pilot to be notified of a failure but I'm not exactly familiar with the additional details that would come to bear on that.
This is Dan. I can talk to it a little bit. It is initially when the original AC came out, it was a requirement. Then they came back and reconsidered. The FAA came back and said it is recommended. What we do is we use the enunciations, and most of the other STC holders use the enunciation because it takes away the questioning from the flight crew if you're only using transponder fail enunciation to indicate a ADS-B fail, because then the flight crew does not have a way to determine is it an ADS-B function or is it my mode AC or mode A or mode C. So we, in all our STCs, and we use a remote enunciator to alleviate that confusion from the flight crew.
Okay. And this next question, and I'll open it to the panel, it says, would a flight test be required if the interfacing GPS and transponder systems were common on a different aircraft type? And they give example, it's the same system on a different aircraft type. So would a flight test still be required if the systems are common across a fleet of aircraft, is what they're asking.
I can answer that also. You are required per the policy memo to have access to the flight test data to support a non-STC approved installation. The policy memo does allow you to say, yes, CMD Flight Solutions has a TDR-94 with GP4000S STC. They have given me authorization to use their flight test data in a written authorization letter, and therefore I can use that to support my major alteration or field approval of my aircraft through the policy memo. But you have to have access to the flight test data.
All right. The next question is about TCAS, and I'll open this to the panel as well. It says, is TCAS 7.1 required for the ADS-B compliance?
This is Gary. No, it is not. 7.1 is a European mandate for aircraft traveling to Europe.
Okay, great. And I'll also open this next question to the panel. It says, are Part 135 aircraft that operate below 18,000 feet still required to have 1090 ES? The question says they understood it was an early requirement but has since been revoked. So they'd just like some clarity on whether Part 135 aircraft that operate below 18,000 feet are still required to have a 1090 ES.
So this is Jim Marks. So I'll tackle that one. So the ADS-B rule is an airspace rule. 135 operator may or may not be required to have a Mode S transponder, but if they're only operating below 18,000 feet, they could certainly install a 1090 or a UAT system and be in compliance with the rule.
Okay. It looks like we just have a few more minutes for a few other questions. We will definitely look to get all of your questions answered after we complete this, though. And this looks like it might be another question for Jim. Are there any changes being made to shorten the FAA STC approval process, considering the ADS-B out mandate is not too far away?
Well, as I mentioned in my presentation, we did revise procedures, certification project procedures to authorize certain ODAs to alleviate the requirement to submit a project notification letter. And that cut off about 30 days on average from the certification timeline. But I don't know of any work internally to do anything beyond that.
Okay. And so maybe we'll make this our last question. It says, can we use ADS-B position information as an input for ground incidents like wingtip to wingtip collision? Will it be effective and approved? A pretty broad question, but if any of the panelists have an answer for that, can they use ADS-B position information as an input for ground incidents?
This is Gary. That is a challenging question. I guess the biggest thing is that I've talked to tower operators, and they will be monitoring ADS-B on the ground, and so they'll say that if there's any trucks or anything like that that are on the runway, they'll be able to see their position. But I've never heard anything about wingtip to wingtip situations. I think the biggest thing is that tower will be able to see the proximity of aircraft together. But other than that, I can't imagine the aircraft being that close together that type of a situation would occur. So I have not heard anything to that effect.
Okay, well, we're out of time for the question and answer period. I want to thank everyone for watching the webinar today, and all of our panelists for joining us and taking on some of these tough questions. We are going to make this webinar available as a replay, and we are going to make the presentations available to you all to be downloaded as well. And I want to once again thank our sponsors, Applied Avionics, Becker Avionics, and CMD Flight Solutions. And of course, all of our panelists, Mr. Jim Marks from the FAA, Gary Harpster from Duncan Aviation, Craig Morgan of Applied Avionics, Hal Adams of Becker, and Daniel Buzz of CMD. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. And with that, we will conclude the webinar.